Hello from gloomy Copenhagen. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today we are back again with one of my favorite types of videos to make, and that is design advice for my subscribers. And today's home was sent in by a viewer in Munich who recently moved in with her boyfriend. She says that they kept some of her furniture and some of his furniture, and she's just not feeling totally satisfied with the space. In her words, she says it's feeling cold and she wants it to be more calm and more aligned. One of the major things she's struggling with, which you've probably already spotted, is this change in flooring material. I feel like this is a pretty common thing that happens to some apartments from this era, where they close in what used to be a balcony and then add a new balcony in order to gain some interior space. And because of that, they have these two different flooring finishes as well as this structural beam cutting through their space. And I want to point out that these aren't just any two different floors. These are two very different floors. There's this really lovely parquet on the living room side and this much colder, harsher tile flooring on the other side, where they have a workstation and dining area set up. She wrote to me that she tried to work with this sort of natural separation to define the zones, but they're feeling like it's too crowded, specifically the dining area, as you can see. So I think it'll be most helpful to approach this by looking at the floor plan. First of all, this is the sketch that she sent me, and I think it's really interesting that the sort of instinctual proportions that she drew don't really match the measurements at all. It's always so fascinating. You can really tell how people perceive space by how they draw it. And here, of course, she feels like the tiled area is much more narrow than it actually is. So let's look at it drawn to scale, and here is the current furniture layout. Overall, I think the reason that this space doesn't feel quite right is, one, because all of the furniture is pushed up against the walls, and two, the use of this negative empty space feels pretty out of proportion. We have all these pieces squished together in the dining area and then this huge amount of empty space between the sofa and the desk. So I think it's important that we sort of center some of these zones on themselves with like strong centers rather than pushing everything against the wall. And I also think we should be a bit more intentional with the distribution of furniture and empty floor space. So I think the idea of using the change in flooring material as an implied boundary between the zones is golden. That's exactly what I think we should do. But right now it's not working for a few reasons. Most importantly, because we can't see the change in flooring. It's covered by this storage piece on one side and the dining table on the other side. So let's go ahead and clear out the space in Photoshop so we can visualize what we're chatting about. If we want to make the most of this boundary, it will be best to have it entirely visible from wall to wall. And I want it to really feel like an edge to the dining and desk area. So no furniture should be straddling this line, especially any sort of seating like these dining chairs. Now, she told me that the reason the dining table is pushed so far away from the window is because they need space to open the balcony door, which makes a lot of sense. But if you think about the footprint of a dining space with 4 seats, it's relatively square, you know? Whereas a single desk pushed up against the wall has a much more narrow footprint. So given where this operable door to the balcony is, I think we should just go ahead and mirror the location of these two zones. This makes for a much cleaner circulation path to the balcony, and it will allow for the dining table to be centered in the tile flooring area. And it also has a nice benefit of making the desk feel a bit more comfortable and less like exposed to the entrance. And with moving the desk, I'm actually going to recommend that we get rid of this white storage piece altogether. I think we can gain back some storage elsewhere in the space, which we'll talk about. And instead of having a very blocky, massive piece that completely covers the flooring transition, I think this is the perfect place to put your big plant to sort of soften the edge of the desk. She made sure to point out in her email that this plant is not usually on the dining table, it's usually on the floor, but they just recently got a dog, so they lifted the plant up, which is super fun and exciting. And as a fellow new dog dad, I totally get you. Our apartment looks pretty different since we brought Maple home. But when you're ready to put that plant back on the floor, I think it should go here. Okay, and as far as the dining area goes, I really want to pull this away from the wall so that it can just be more centered and sort of stand confidently on its own. I'm sure I've mentioned this in a past video, but when I'm working with a small square dining area, the most efficient table shape is always going to be a circle with chairs on a 45-degree angle. I think this would be a major improvement. Maybe one of the most important things I could recommend. This tiled floor area is just over 2 meters, so a round table, maybe 1 meter or 110 in diameter, will be a really comfortable size for 4 chairs. And as far as materiality goes, I would love to see some warmer tones in the dining area, mainly just to really combat what's going on with the tile and the white workstation. A mid-tone to darker wood for the table and chairs could be really beautiful. Something that sort of speaks to the wood floor without totally matching it. Keeping it all darker in value also really gives the dining area a stronger, more confident energy, and it helps distinguish it from the desk workstation area. I would say bonus points if the chairs have a secondary material that brings in another warm texture, like maybe a woven seat or some sort of cool upholstery fabric, something to add even more depth. Now, if you guys have seen any of my other videos, especially in this series, you know that one of my go-to methods for defining a dining area is to have a really substantial pendant lamp over the table. But here specifically, they just installed a pendant lamp in the living area that she said they really love. And given the scale of the dining area, I don't really think a pendant is necessary here, but I do think this big blank wall behind the table is a great opportunity to sort of anchor the space. So I would bring the large print that you have by the door over here. This will introduce some color to the space, and we can really highlight it by hanging a sconce above it. In general, she mentioned that they're really struggling with lighting in this space, so we want to bring in as many opportunities for different light sources as we can. She said that she's already ordered a desk lamp, which is awesome, but I would love to go a step further and bring in one more light source in this area with a portable table lamp that can live on the dining table. Having as many small lighting sources as possible in your space is so important. If you guys haven't seen my video on lighting, I invite you to go watch that for a deeper dive. Okay, and moving on to the living room half of this room, I again first want to talk about the floor plan here. The current scale of the furniture, specifically the rug and the coffee table, is just way too timid and making the living area feel like it's kind of cowering in the corner, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that's a weird way to put it, but the current rug, it looks to me like that's maybe 150 by 200 centimeters. It's way too small for the space. We want the implied edge of the living room to be way past the door so that it will feel bigger and more comfortable and not like squished into the corner. And also so that we have a more reasonable margin of negative space for circulation between the dining area and the living area, not just a huge amount of empty floor. So I'm going to recommend that you get a rug that is at least 200 by 300, but I think even better would be 250 by 350. Something similar in color and texture to your current rug would definitely be great. Maybe you could go a bit darker to have a little bit more contrast with the walls. Now about the sofa, I think I've made myself clear on this channel that I strongly dislike sofas with a built-in chaise like this. I think that whether they're floating away from the wall in a big open space or they're pushed up against a wall, they're just really difficult to plan around, and they always end up feeling kind of clunky and awkward to me. Now that being said, I think some of you may have misunderstood me and thought that I was talking about all L-shaped sofas, which is not the case. While they're not usually my first choice for just an average living room, I do think that there are times where they feel very appropriate, and this is one of them. Because we're in a really cozy corner of a room with no windows or doors. I think in spaces that feel more intimate and more like a den than a living room, L-shaped sofas can be really great pushed into a corner like this. But if any of you are going to get an L-shaped sofa, I have two very passionate recommendations. One is to get a modular sofa that can be reconfigured. So if you redesign your space or move into a new space, you aren't limited by this super rigid footprint of a sofa. And two is to make sure that every seat of the sofa has a back to it. Because a chaise with no back like this is basically just an attached footrest, right? So if you have more than two people sitting on a sofa like this, it's instantly kind of uncomfortable. So I think another very, very important recommendation is to invest in a new sofa. The current sofa is really hampering the vibe of the space, both because of its shape and its color. Currently, everything in this room is very, very light or very, very dark, and everything has a pretty cold undertone. So I think softening out that spectrum with a deeper, warmer, neutral tone would be really nice and much more cozy. Along with that, I think a much larger coffee table to fill out the living room would be super beneficial. A sofa like this is definitely starting to feel pretty heavy and thick, which is nice to a point, but I would love to see that balanced out with a sort of sharper, fresher material, like maybe glass. I know that some people are super passionate about hating glass coffee tables and glass dining tables. So if that's you, another material with a similar vibe, like maybe acrylic or even a metal or a stone, could be great. I would just avoid wood, especially if you're going for a wood dining table. If you guys want a deeper dive on materials, you can go watch my video on materials. I'm doing a lot of shameless video plugs here. Already I feel like we can see how the seating area is more inviting and more cozy thanks to this stronger contrast, but I would love to make the space feel even more defined. So first of all, I have to say that I'm not a huge fan of the artwork that you have behind your sofa. Firstly, because like the rug, it's totally out of scale for the room. The amount of space between the two pieces feels pretty off to me, but more importantly, it just screams mass-produced art. I don't know how these like shaggy cows took the world by storm the way that they did, but they did. They're everywhere. And I just have a hunch that this art is not reflecting you or your boyfriend's personalities or interests or taste at all. So I'm going to go ahead and say, get rid of those. I say this all the time in my consultations, but I am very firmly against buying art or having art just to fill a wall in your home that you feel like needs art. I don't think what you display on the walls of your home should be thought of as decor. It's so much better to slowly collect art that you love, or even just frame and display things from your life, like literally anything. I think like a receipt from a restaurant you were at, framed in an interesting way, would be 10,000 times cooler than a mass-produced piece like this. But all of that being said, I don't even think you need art above the sofa here. You definitely could, but if the sofa has enough contrast with the wall, I think it's actually really nice to just let that line at the back of the sofa sort of like hug the space and make it more cozy. And I think it would be great to cap the end of the sofa with a tall floor lamp, just to sort of punctuate the corner of this zone, along with a nice little side table or stool or something. I don't think this should be like a big, bulky side table with a table lamp on top of it because, like I said at the beginning, I think it feels better to not have all the walls just lined with furniture. That's why we're floating around dining table and why I think we should sort of pair a lamp and a small table together. I think it just feels a lot more dynamic and balanced this way. And I also wouldn't want the side table to compete with your extremely cool vintage dresser that you have by the door, which I think should go right here between the sofa and the dining room. Its current location by the door makes for a very crowded experience when you enter the room. Like, it just sort of immediately comes at you, right? I'd prefer for you guys to have some open floor space when you enter the room. I think it'll just feel a lot nicer and a lot more open. And moving it to the opposite wall is a really great way to sort of mark this space between the zones that we're leaving open for circulation. We have these two edges, right, defined by the flooring transition and beam on one side, and then the edge of the new rug on the other side. And placing like a solid piece of furniture that's pretty tall between these two boundaries without crossing them feels really nice, I think. It brings some much appreciated order to the space plan. I actually wish it was even taller in a way. I might actually mount some shelves above it to house all your books because I made you get rid of that white storage piece. I think that's a really nice way to give it even more height without blocking too much light from the window. And getting shelves that are a contrasting material, maybe like a metal or a painted cool color, could be really nice, I think. And then you have this really great surface to style below it. I feel like some plants here could be nice. I wouldn't have a lamp like you did before because I feel like it would compete with the floor lamp next to the sofa. And I like the idea of plants along with the one next to your desk, kind of marking the boundary between the zones. Now, I think the wall where this dresser used to be is a great place for some art. When I'm working with a pretty narrow stretch of wall like this with no furniture up against it, I'm really into stacking a few smaller pieces of art to create a nice vertical composition that really fills up the wall. But again, don't rush yourself with this. Keep your eyes open and slowly collect pieces that you genuinely love, or like I said, even frame some of your own photos and memories in a cool way. Just don't go out shopping for a piece of art specifically for this wall. I don't think that's the right approach. This isn't a set we're designing, it's your home, and everything on display on the walls you should genuinely love. Okay, and moving back to the living room, I think there's more than enough space here to bring in an armchair that will sort of round out the seating area in a more social way for when you're hosting, and also keep it feeling like centered off the wall. Like it's really its own room here. You know what I mean? I think it's important that this chair would again be a mid-tone to darker color so that it doesn't get lost floating out here. Maybe some leather or a patterned upholstery could be really nice. Just make sure it's a chair that looks good from all angles. A lot of chairs are pretty ugly from behind. And about the TV setup, she wrote to me that she's not sure about the console under the TV and she's thinking about changing it, and also that they're planning to get rid of the sound system speakers on either side of it. But honestly, I think the console looks pretty nice. I think the dark color might bother you less once you bring in more mid-tones and deeper values into the space. And I think the speakers are actually really cool. My partner and I had a similar setup in an old apartment. I'm actually super into it. So if you're planning on getting rid of those just for aesthetic reasons, my 2 cents is that you don't have to do that. The only thing I would do here is mount your TV just a little bit above the console, not too high, but that will be just such a cleaner look. And it will open up this whole surface for styling, maybe with some books or other cool tchotchkes that you might have, and definitely a lamp on this end. I think we need to get more light sources deeper into this space. Oh, and along with that, I would definitely make use of your new big coffee table surface to have some fun styling it. Get some candles. It will really enhance the coziness. And one more final thing, you had a specific question about where to put your dog's bed, and I think it can totally go in the same place that it was before. It seems like a really cozy corner of the room, but that makes me think that if you do move forward with a modular sofa like this, I would probably have a section without an arm here, just so it feels more open to the TV wall and you're not creating sort of a strange pocket between the sofa and the TV console. I'll make sure to Photoshop a sofa without an arm. Okay, and I think those are all my thoughts. Let's have a little before and after moment, shall we? I know it was kind of a lot of changes, but I would say the most important and impactful ones are definitely the round dining table, a different sofa, and a larger rug. Those are top priority, in my opinion, followed by everything else I said. I think this space has so much potential and it can come together to be really, really lovely. It will just feel so much more balanced with this new space plan, such better circulation and flow. Maybe I'll actually make some diagrams to show how much nicer the circulation will be. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. I hope this was fun and maybe even a little bit inspiring for your own space. If you want to submit your home to be featured in a future episode of this series, you can send horizontal photos of your space to noahdanielstudio@gmail.com. And if you don't want to wait for your space to be chosen, or you don't love the idea of your home being publicized on YouTube, I do offer one-on-one consultations. So you can email me for more details about that. And if you aren't interested in advice for your home, but you still had fun watching this, make sure you subscribe to see future videos. It really helps me out. Okay, that's all. Love you. Bye.